Good afternoon, Albertans. Today we're going into part 2. Jason Kenney, the liberal bastard out of Ottawa. Specifically now, in this series, every video I produce is going to go through in great detail constitutional rights that the Alberta citizen, has been stripped by Jason Kenney through Bill 32. Affirmative action. Have you heard of affirmative action? We've all at some point heard that. I think when we hear affirmative action and your rights, we think of America, blacks, and all the affirmative action that they did. Affirmative action is your constitutional right to mobilize, to move around inside your country into regions. In Canada now, specifically, we have that right. It's in the Canadian Constitution, Section 6, Article 4. Created in 1982 by arguably my favorite premier of all time, Peter LOUGHEED. He was raised in the Social Credit Party family. He became the first premier of Alberta with the new Conservative Party, free from all the liberal agenda. We hear about the notwithstanding clause and the power of Peter LOUGHEED, who, during the time of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, went around Canada and organized every premier. A constitutional feat that may never be repeated again in Canada. And for those academics who will be watching this, to get constitutional changes and to get them passed in the country of Canada, as you'll hear from Richard Albert if you watch some of his videos, you'll know that Canada has the hardest amendable constitution in probably the world, one of the hardest. Peter LOUGHEED did that in 1982. We've all heard about the notwithstanding clause and other sections that go all the way through into the 90s that Peter LOUGHEED added. But we're going to specifically today, under affirmative action, your rights to affirmative action, we're going to look at Section 6, Article 4, one that's never been talked about by the right or left here in Canada. And so all citizens know, and all, foreigners who are going to be watching this from academia, other nationals from other countries, which this will be getting shared out into that world. Canada, as a lot of you are aware, is a constitutional monarchy. When we talk about constitutional democracies, there is a major difference here. When you talk about left and right, conservative, liberal, and even get into labor, what they don't talk about with a constitutional monarchy is the up and down scale. Autocracy and libertarian. When you look at the rights and freedoms of the individual and how much they have versus how much state power or authoritarian power the government has. Canada and the provincial leaders always go just by the sheer will of being in a constitutional monarchy, generally hit the scale of autocracy every time. There's very little accountability. When you look at even a republic like the United States, the powers of the people and the rights and freedoms are way down here on that scale, which is more power to the people, versus something like Canada, where the state really has that autocratic power. Now, where do these sections come from in our Constitution that do give us our freedoms? They come from history in Canada, and generally through violence and crime, where the government had to cede those rights to the people because of the harm that was being created. And in 1982, Section 6, which is the mobility laws here in Canada, defined exclusively 1 through 4 as the power of the province, number 1. Number 2, then we get into the country, and specifically 3 being the citizen first, then the permanent citizen or permanent resident, because they're not a true Canadian citizen, permanent resident. And those are clearly defined in our Constitution in that order of how it's supposed to be. So these laws you've never heard of, no union brings them up, no left or right government wants to bring these up. even though Peter LOUGHEED organized every province and had this ratified. Why is that, and what are mobility rights under affirmative action? Mobility rights are the rights of citizens to move throughout the country of Canada into any province or region, being that of a territory, to get employment, to move there, to live there, and get employed. These laws, specifically Section 4, that gives the provincial powers to say, hey, look, wait a minute, our unemployment rate is greater than the unemployment rate of the country. We are restricting all mobility levels until our citizens in our region, which is for Alberta, the province, get back to work and have gainful employment according to the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights, ratified by all 5 Security Council members in every country in the world. So, they were put in. Peter LOUGHEED had that ratified in 1982 to protect the good citizens of Alberta so that all people in Alberta, your sons and daughters, would be protected to develop out of the hundreds of trades if they couldn't make the academics in the primary universities, that there would be a secondary level of education, which we call the trades. Hundreds of them. That skilled level of employment, which you want to call it, and you can go on the government website, they outline them. Hundreds, literally hundreds, is over half the employed citizens in Alberta. And there were laws placed by Peter LOUGHEED to restrict the government's ability to bring in citizens from other countries or other provinces here in Canada during times of extreme unemployment. As of June this year, Jason Kenney ignored Peter LOUGHEED's Constitutional Section 6, Article 4, even though Alberta's unemployment rate was 15.6% and still climbing Albertans. Canada's is 12.3%. Alberta's non-participation rate is 6%. Canada's is 2.8%. So we're already 8% of our citizens are more unemployed than the rest of Canada. But Jason Kenney ignored the law of Section 4, saying you must restrict those. You can go on the government website and you'll see that there are only 5 trades out of the hundreds that are restricted in Canada from any province or any country coming in that Jason Kenney's going to bring in to make a permanent resident here in Canada, to bring them in and take your jobs. Are you ready for this? During COVID, Jason Kenney did not end his rural immigration policy program during COVID-19. In fact, there have been 11 kick completions done this year alone from January to June of 2020, and which is over 3 months of COVID time where we shut the borders down. Jason Kenney approved over 2,000 immigrants to come with a score of 300 to 350 on the immigration test, which means barely able to read and write, barely speak English, and not at the acceptable levels to get preferred immigrant status. Jason Kenney's already brought 4,500 of his 10,000, almost half of which during COVID, to replace Albertans. His economic policy says that this Bill 32 is going to get 55,000 more jobs by taking away every citizen in the non-union sector's overtime, that employers are allowed to up to 2 to 3 years, depending on which industry they're in, are going to be able to work you 2 weeks, 7 days a week, at up to 12 hours a day, day shift, or 12 hours a day, night shift, all regular time, with 2 weeks off following that, whereby they can hire another crew to work 7 12s, all regular time. So you're going to get 2 weeks, all regular, no overtime, time and a half is all gone if the employer wishes. They can serve this to you at your workplace and say, here you go, Mr. or Mrs. Albertan, we've taken away all your overtime. And you got this registered letter. If you don't like it, See you later. Bye-bye. You've been issued this. Jason's rationale for this is that it will lead to more immigration and more mobility within Canada to have more skilled people come in, even though Alberta's unemployment rate is already 15.6%. Canada's is 12.3%. This is not a time, constitutionally, as outlined in Mobility Rights, Affirmative Action, Section 6, Article 4. Jason is to shut this down. It's unconstitutional. It's against your human rights. But he's not. He's continued and proceeded, even in the face of COVID-19. He approved over 2,000 immigrants, which, like I said, will be 10,000 by year's end for rural Alberta at such a devastatingly high unemployment rate. Ruled unconstitutional. He'll allow Canadian citizens to come. He'll allow permanent residents from anywhere in Canada to come. And of course, he's increasing immigration, allowing everybody to come. He's breached the Constitution. You will not hear a word about this from NDP. You will not hear a word about it from the Liberals, because this is a left agenda. This is a completely Liberal policy. It is one of the worst of the worst, because Jason Kenney is a Liberal Conservative from the historical Liberal Conservative Party of 1873, which went on for a series of decades, was reestablished in 1922 to 1938, where he clearly draws from that to attack Donald Trump, which I put in video 1. But this is where we're at, Albertans. Unions have been stripped of all kinds in the labor relations side. There's a labor code, and then there's labor relations for the non-union or the person not working union environment. Jason goes on to empower not local unions, everybody. He's empowering the CLAC organization specifically and the Alberta Building Trades organization to nationalize your agreements, taking it out of the local. The sons and daughters of Alberta will not be put first, which is what the design of a union was. That, you know, parents, you could be trusted that if your kids couldn't make it in the academic world and the primary education above college into the university or in the really high technical college, they could go down to the college trade level and could be secured in a good paying job. But Jason Kenney has stripped specifically the local unions in all trade-related fields and given that power to specific organizations of a national kind, a national interest, which again breaches the Constitution of Canada, Section 6, Article 4. That's number 1. I'm going to continue now, and we're going to start breaking these things down into specifics. Like I said, this will be going through academia, specifically the United States, the United Kingdom, and all through here in Alberta, and some constitutional experts in Canada. This will be going to Yale, Harvard, a series of other schools, Oxford, Cambridge, the list goes on. As well, it's going to be going to the UN Security Council, permanent 5 members, which I heard from China. It's just crazy, but we're going to get into that in another video. Today, it is Section 6, Article 4, Mobility Rights under Affirmative Action, according to the Constitution of Canada. Thank you.